Welcome, friends, to the Washington, D.C. United Lodge of Theosophists White Lotus Day celebration. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Russian noblewoman, also known as the lion-hearted esoteric she, passed away on May 8, 1891. Lodges throughout the world are celebrating White Lotus Day today or at a regularly scheduled meeting this week. We received the following email from our Mumbai Lodge. Dear friends, we send you fraternal greetings and all good wishes on the forthcoming occasion of White Lotus Day, when we commemorate the passing away of our guru and teacher, Madame H.P. Blavatsky. As we remember HPB, an accredited messenger from the White Lodge of Adepts, we realize that we owe a deep debt of gratitude to her, who brought for us the priceless treasure of the philosophy of Theosophy. The philosophy of the rational explanation of things, which, as every sincere student aspirant must have recognized, has always proved to be a source of our strength, and which today also helps us to remain calm and steady while the storm seems to be raging all around us. Truly, as Mr. Judge expresses it, as a babe to the mother, as harvest to the earth, so are all those bound to her who enjoy the fruit of her life. White Lotus Day is not a memorial to HPB's person or personality, or to her individual thoughts or wit, but it is a devotional memorial to celebrate the signpost she left for us to the path to divine wisdom, the ever-becoming of spiritual truth. It is in the spiritualized facts of correspondences, of analogies, of symbols, and glyphs that we find Theosophy, the enduring work and message of HPB. She was acting as an ambassador, bridging the gulf between the knowledge of today, the knowledge of 1875 in the West, and the wisdom of the trans-Himalayan masters. A message that is our timeless human birthright. HPB came to the world at large. She was the preserver, the synthesizer, and the transmitter of ancient spiritual wisdom, codifying old and pure records, resuscitating the spiritual heritage that is ours. She repeatedly advised us not to follow her or her path, but to follow the path she showed, the masters that are behind. So on White Lotus Day, we find gathering of souls, a communion of oneness of souls, readings from devotional books she pointed to for this occasion, and a talk evoking the concepts of Theosophy. This commune is largely done virtually this and last year due to COVID-19. In so doing, we express oneness to further the objects of universal brotherhood, that is applied altruism, that is Theosophy. By communing and redirecting life and lives to the work of HPB, we participate in the continual lighting up of Manas. We attune ourselves with the task of creating the means by which each human can see through this illusory material existence and open our hearts to charity, justice, and generosity. Through self-education and self-efforts, we create our own path that follows the path that she showed to the state that she modeled. We will have 3 readings followed by a talk on contributions by HPB. The Ring of Souls, a communion of oneness of souls, readings from devotional books she pointed to for this occasion, and a talk evoking the concepts of Theosophy. This commune is largely done virtually this and last year due to COVID-19. In so doing, we express oneness to further the objects of universal brotherhood, that is applied altruism, that is Theosophy. By communing and redirecting life and lives to the work of HPB, we participate in the continual lighting up of Manas. We attune ourselves with the task of creating the means by which each human can see through this illusory material existence and open our hearts to charity, justice, and generosity. Through self-education and self-efforts, we create our own path that follows the path that she showed to the state that she modeled. We will have 3 readings followed by a talk on contributions by HPB.
White Lotus Day reading number 1 from the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna. What, O Keshava, is the description of that wise and devoted man who is fixed in contemplation and confirmed in spiritual knowledge? What may such a sage declare? Where may he dwell? Does he move and act like other men? Krishna. A man is said to be confirmed in spiritual knowledge when he forsaketh every desire which entereth into his heart, and of himself is happy and content in the self through the self. His mind is undisturbed in adversity. He is happy and contented in prosperity, and he is a stranger to anxiety, fear, and anger. Such a man is called a Muni. When in every condition he receives each event, whether favorable or unfavorable, with an equal mind which neither likes nor dislikes, his wisdom is established. And, having met good or evil, neither rejoiceth at one nor is cast down by the other. He is confirmed in spiritual knowledge when, like the tortoise, he can draw in all his senses and restrain them from their wonted purposes. The hungry man loseth sight of every other object but the gratification of his appetite. And when he is become acquainted with the Supreme, he loseth all taste for objects of whatever kind. The tumultuous senses and organs hurry away by force, the heart even of the wise man who striveth after perfection. Let a man, restraining all these, remain in devotion at rest in me, his true self. For he who hath his senses and organs in control possesses spiritual knowledge. He who attendeth to the inclinations of the senses, in them hath a concern. From this concern is created passion, from passion, anger. From anger is produced delusion. From delusion, a loss of memory. From the loss of memory, loss of discrimination. And from loss of discrimination, loss of all. But he who, free from attachment or repulsion for objects, experienceth them through the senses and organs, with his heart obedient to his will, attains to tranquility of thought. And this tranquil state attained, therefore shall soon result a separation from all troubles, and his mind being thus at ease, fixed upon one subject, it embraceth wisdom from all sides. The man whose heart and mind are not at rest is without wisdom or the power of contemplation. Who doth not practice reflection hath no calm. And how can a man without calm obtain happiness? The uncontrolled heart, following the dictates of the moving passions, snatcheth away his spiritual knowledge, as the storm the bark upon the raging ocean. Therefore, O great armed one, he is possessed of spiritual knowledge, whose senses are withheld from objects of sense. What is night to those who are unenlightened is a day to his gaze. What seems as day is known to him as night, the night of ignorance. Such is the self-governed sage.
This reading is from the Light of Asia. The fourth truth is the way. It openeth wide, plain for all feet to tread, easy and near. The noble eightfold path, it goeth straight to peace and refuge, here. Manifold tracks lead to yon sister peaks around, whose snows the gilded clouds are curled. By steep or gentle slopes the climber comes where breaks that other world. Strong limbs may dare the rugged road which storms, soaring and perilous the mountain's breast. The weak must wind from slower ledge to ledge, with many a place of rest. So is the eightfold path which brings to peace. By lower or by upper heights it goes. The firm soul hastes, the feeble tarries. All will reach the sunlit snows. The first good level is right doctrine. Walk in fear of Dharma, shunning all offense. In heed of karma, which doth make man's fate, in lordship over sense. The second is right purpose. Have good will to all that lives, letting unkindness die and greed and wrath, so that your lives be made like soft airs passing by. The third is right discourse. Govern the lips as they were palace doors, the king within. Tranquil and fair and courteous be all words, which from that presence win. The fourth is right behavior. Let each act as soil, a fault or help a merit grow, like threads of silver seen through crystal beads. Let love through good deeds show. Four higher roadways be. Only those feet may tread them which have done with earthly things. Right purity, right thought, right loneliness, right rapture. Spread no wings, for sunward flight, thou soul with unplumed vans. Sweet is the lower air, and safe, and known the homely levels. Only strong ones leave the nest each makes his own. Dear is the love I know of wife and child. Pleasant the friends and pastimes of your years, fruitful of good life's gentle charities. False, though firm set its fears. Live, ye who must, such lives as live on these. Make golden stairways of your weakness. Rise by daily sojourn with those fantasies to lovelier verities. So shall ye pass to clearer heights, and find easier ascents and lighter loads of sins, and larger will to burst the bonds of sense, entering the path. Who wins to such commencement hath the first stage touched. He knows the noble truths, the eightfold road. By few or many steps, such shall attain Nirvana's blessed abode. Who standeth at the second stage, made free from doubts, delusions, and the inward strife, Lord of all lusts, quit of the priests and books, shall live but one more life. Yet onward lies the third stage. Purged and pure hath grown the stately spirit here, hath risen to love all living things in perfect peace. His life at end, life's prison is broken, Nay, there are who surely pass living and visible to utmost goal, by fourth stage of the holy ones and the Buddhas, and they of stainless soul. Lo, like fierce foes, slain by some warrior, 10 sins along these stages lie in dust. The love of self, false faith, and doubt are the 3. 2 more, hatred and lust. Who of these 5 is conqueror hath trod 3 stages out of 4. Yet there abide the love of life on earth, desire for heaven, self-praise, error, and pride. As one who stands on yonder snowy horn, having naught o'er him but the boundless blue, so these sins being slain, the man is come Nirvana's verge unto. Him the gods envy from their lower seats, him the 3 worlds in ruin should not shake. All life is lived for him, all deaths are dead. Karma will no more make new houses. Seeking nothing, he gains all. Foregoing self, the universe grows. If any teach nirvana is to seize, say unto such they lie. If any teach nirvana is to live, say unto such they err, not knowing this, nor what light shines beyond their broken lamps, nor lifeless, timeless bliss. Enter the path. There is no grief like hate, no pains like passions, no deceit like sense. Enter the path. Far hath he gone whose foot treads down one fond offense. Enter the path. There spring the healing streams, quenching all thirst. There bloom the mortal flowers, carpeting all the way with joy. There throng swiftest and sweetest hours.
Reading 3 from the writings of H.P. Blavatsky. The beacon light upon which the eyes of all real Theosophists are fixed is the same towards which in all ages the imprisoned human soul has struggled. This beacon, whose light shines upon no earthly seas, but which has mirrored itself in the somber depths of the primordial waters of infinite space, is called by us, as by the earliest Theosophists, divine wisdom. This name, wisdom, or as we say sometimes, the wisdom religion or Theosophy, is as old as the human mind. The title of sages, the priests of this worship of truth, was its first derivative. These names were afterwards transformed into philosophy and philosophers, the lovers of science or of wisdom. It is to Pythagoras that we owe that name, as also that of Gnosis, the system of the knowledge of things as they are, or of the essence that is hidden beneath the external appearances. Under that name, so noble and so correct in its definition, all the masters of antiquity designated the aggregate of our knowledge of things human and divine. As Theosophy is the way that leads to truth, in every religion as in every science, so occultism, so to say, is the touchstone and universal solvent. It is the Ariadne's thread given by the master to the disciple who ventures into the labyrinth of the mysteries of being, the torch that lights him through the dangerous maze of life, forever the enigma of the Sphinx. But the light thrown by this torch can be discerned only by the eye of the awakened soul, by our spiritual senses. It blinds the eye of the materialist as the sun blinds that of the owl. Belief in the masters was never made an article of faith in the TS, but for its founders, the commands received from them when it was established have ever been sacred. And this is what one of them wrote in a letter preserved to this day. Theosophy must not represent merely a collection of moral verities, a bundle of metaphysical ethics epitomized in theoretical dissertations. Theosophy must be made practical and has, therefore, to be disencumbered of useless discussion. It has to find objective expression in an all-embracing code of life thoroughly impregnated with its spirit. the spirit of mutual tolerance, charity, and love. It is only Theosophy, well understood, that can save the world from despair by reproducing social and religious reform, a task once before accomplished in history by Gautama, the Buddha, a peaceful reform without one drop of blood spilled. For many a long year, the great orphan, humanity, has been crying aloud in the darkness for guidance and for light. Amid the increasing splendors of progress, purely material, of a science that nourished the intellect but left the spirit to starve. Humanity, dimly feeling its origin and presaging its destiny, has stretched out towards the east empty hands that only a spiritual philosophy can fill. Aching from the divisions, the jealousies, the hatreds that rend its very life, it has cried for some sure foundation on which to build the solidarity it senses. Some metaphysical basis from which its loftiest social ideas may rise, secure. Only the masters of the Eastern wisdom can set that foundation, can satisfy at once the intellect and the spirit, can guide humanity safely through the night to the dawn of a larger day.
Friends, H.P. Blavatsky inaugurated the beginning of a cycle of Masonic pioneering. She was and is the herald of the dawning mind of tomorrow. While there were messengers who came before, not one of them could give his life entirely to the spread of the universal wisdom religion. But in 1875, the hour struck for laying the foundation of a new order of ages in spiritual reality in its own right. But in 1875, the hour struck for laying the foundation of a new order of ages in spiritual reality in its own right. HPB worked through none of the pre-existing forms of the Theosophical movement, but forged her own, the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity. Although she built upon the work of the forerunners, without which her own mission would have been impossible, the past gave her only building blocks, tools, and workers. The design of the temple she erected and the spirit which at last found its embodiment were things the Western world knew nothing of before. She had brought them from the source to the new world and for the world that is to be. HPB's life depicts the history of an age. Of the great drama she initiated, and which still goes on, William Q. Judge has written, "The race is, as a whole, in a transition state, and many of its units are kept back by the condition of the whole. We find the path difficult because, being of the race, the general race tendencies very strongly affect us. This we cannot do away with in a moment. The only way we can alter it is by such action now as makes of each one a center for good, a force that makes for righteousness, and that is guided by wisdom." The new condition calls for a change in thought and nature. So the masters have said, this is a transition age. And he who has ears to hear will hear that what has so far been said. We are working for the new cycles and centuries. What we do now in this transition age will be like what the great Diane Johans did in the transition point, the midway point in evolution at the time when all matter and all types were in a transition and fluid state. They then gave the new impulse for the new types, which resulted later in the vast varieties of nature. In the mental development, we are now at the same point, and what we now do in faith and hope for others and for ourselves will result similarly on the path to which it is all directed. We are not working for some definite organization of the new years to come, but for a change in the manas and buddhi of the race. That is why it may seem indefinite, but it is, nevertheless, very defined and very great in scope. If we are to appreciate the occultism of HPB, we shall have to do it through a consideration of the occultism of our own age. If we are to appreciate the occultism of HPB, we shall have to do it through a consideration of the occultism in our own nature. There is of every man a portion, and a portion only of his nature, which can be seen and contacted by others. The vast, the more enduring, and the frontal part of our nature is known, if known at all, only to ourselves. Even when we try to plumb into its very depth, we find our plumb line all too short. There are unsounded depths in every human heart, and it is through that part of our nature not known by others, scantily known by ourselves, that we must thread our way as best we can into the light of the occultism of HPB. Like HPB, we and all the others have a certain perception of the underlying principles in which nature rests, from which nature has proceeded, and whose due and orderly ritual is the marching order of nature henceforth. What are our principles? What were hers? None but ourselves may know our principles. None but ourselves know what our ideals are, and none other than ourselves can tell to what extent our conduct expresses our principles and embodies our ideals. HPB's perception of the principles of nature, visible and invisible, were placed on record by herself. Her ideals were expressed over and over again, and for 17 years, from 1875 until 1891, she lived in the pitiless light of publicity. So if we are truly to evaluate the occultism of HPB, consider first the principles, then consider the ideals, then consider her conduct during those 17 years. HPB came into a world divided into two armed and hostile camps. On the one hand, a sectarianism masquerading as religion. On the other hand, a blank and sheer materialism robed in the name of science. She put forth fundamentally this principle, that God is not a being. It is from one basis that all good issues forth, and all evil also. It is under one law that comes pain and bliss. Nature is divinely impartial and impersonal. The sectarians could but regard her as an enemy of all their interest. The materialists could but regard her as a fanatic. So much for her principles. Take her ideals. They are expressed in the first object of Theosophy, whose inspiration she was, to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood of humanity without any distinction of race or creed or caste or color or sex or condition. What was the basis of that hope for utopia, which was her ideal? The fundamental identity of every soul with the Supreme Soul. Imagine any sect accepting the first object of the Theosophical Society. The rich parishioner does not care to associate with the poor one. The white parishioner does not want to associate with a black one. The holy member of the congregation who keepeth the Sabbath does not desire to fraternize with the sinful, the errant, and the weak. And under the canons of Christianity, Western science and Western religion have ever looked upon woman as inferior to man, or the black or the yellow race as the inferior of the white, the kindly disposed poor man as the inferior of the powerful, the educated, and the rich. Her second ideal, knowing what the real enemy of mankind is, was so far as impossible to persuade men to compare, to contrast, to weigh professions against practices, claims against facts, to see whether the religion that I believe in is better than other religions, to see by actual investigation whether the ideas of God and of nature and of man that I hold are superior to the ideas of my fellow man. That the sectarians should compare the foundations of their faith, that the materialists should consider whether nature is patterned upon a model of destruction. And her third object was to study, to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the unknown powers latent in man. She knew, being a practical occultist, that the Anglo-Saxon race was doomed to dominate the world. Therefore, her mission must be written and spoken in Anglo-Saxon terms, in English. She was foreigner of a distrusted and despised country, Russia. She was a woman. She was obese in appearance, uncouth in presentment to other nations, and she was at the age when women are accounted old. She came to this country 148 years ago, landing here on July 4, 1873, what is now Independence Day. Within 5 years, she had written in English and had published a book, the like of which does not exist upon this earth, Isis Unveiled. No one need be in doubt whether as regards himself or regards nature or as regards HPB, that this was a very big, important book. If you want to know HPB, study Isis Unveiled. No one need be in doubt whether as regards himself or as regards to nature or as regards to HPB. To know the principles of Jesus of Nazareth, you do not need to go to the Pope or priest. Study the 5th chapter of Matthew. That will tell you more about the principles of Christ than all the sermons ever preached, all the blood ever shed in the name of Christ. If you want to know about HPB's ideals, you have but to look at the 3 objects of Theosophy. In HPB, there was a great teacher, proved by the great teaching. There was a great leader of mankind, proved by the noblest of ideals. And there, in woman form, was the greatest warrior on this earth since the days of the Krishna avatar over 50 centuries ago. You can read every word she wrote, but never shall you find one word of conceit or malice in all she ever said or did. and pride, hatred, ambition, and the lust of possessions, these terrible enemies of mankind, were absolutely absent from her. As darkness is absent from the sun, that is the occultism of HPB. Compare our principles with hers. We believe that nature proceeds from a personal source, is conducted upon a personal basis, and that personal favors can be obtained from the Supreme Being. We believe that there is not a spiritual and moral and an intellectual law of sowing and reaping. As we all know, there is a physical law. Hence, we constantly try to seduce nature when we do not try to ravish her. All our ideals, though not necessarily bad, are earthly and are personal. Her ideals, based upon the ancient, constant, and eternal spirit, were unchanging ideals. Seek the same life everywhere, seeing the same essence in all things, whether good or evil, she bestowed her labors unselfishly upon all men, whether they be good or evil. For years, religionists and scientists and men who have the ear of the public have repeated that HPB was grossly immoral. The great bulk of humanity have heard it and believed it. But the plain truth is that HPB was physically incapable of the immoralities charged against her because she was an androgen. If one studies her statements of principles, if one reads the constant iteration of her ideals, if one watches her conduct under slander, ridicule, betrayal, and ingratitude at the hands of those she strove only to aid, you will find that a morality, spiritual, intellectual, psychic, universal, that transcends any ideal pictured to mankind. HPB was crucified of the body, of the mind, and of the soul, and of the spirit for 17 years before the mercenaries of two continents. She gave up all that makes life worthwhile for any living human being. Did she sympathize with herself? No. From first to last, no word of self-commiseration, no word of self-pity. What was the secret of their occultism? Seeing the law of life, knowing that persecutor and betrayer, as well as friend and follower, were her brothers. She but played the part of her father, of the prodigal son. She but embodied what others only taught. The secret is simple. This is a world which lacks on every hand everything worthwhile. She came to give to man. Just use the larval stage from caterpillar to butterfly as the perfect analogy of our civilization. Out of this rotting chrysalis will emerge new civilization, will emerge a pure religion, a conception of the purpose of life, that we are in evolution as immortal spiritual entities, and not sparks from the fiery furnace of satanic irony at the back of all things. All that is part of the occultism of HPB. Whether you go amongst her foes or amongst her followers who became her betrayers, it matters not. You will find everywhere a superabundance of testimony. First, that HPB could perform phenomena transcending all that we know of, and the laws of nature, the laws of mind, and the laws of God. Next, you will find that she could perform these phenomena at will. Her mission is a failure for those who failed to study her principles, to adopt her ideals, and to emulate her conduct. But over the earth today, everywhere, there are men and women of every country, of every clime, of every race, and of every creed, who are studying her enunciation of principles, who are striving to assimilate into their own lives the ideals that she held dear, who are doing their utmost to follow the path she showed, the masters who are behind. HPB, coming at a cyclic interval, started a fire burning that nothing can quench in 100, 1,000, 10,000 years from now. The presence will still seem ever clear and ever near and ever dear to those who brush in any way the occultism of HPB. To carry on her work, to see that the leaven she gave, the seed she sowed, shall be watered, if need be, through their blood and their tears, is an emulation of the occultism of HPB. As for calling this day White Lotus Day, the lotus is a highly significant symbol. It is the flower sacred to nature and her gods. It represents the abstract and the concrete universes, standing as the emblem of the productive powers of both spiritual and physical nature. The seeds of the lotus contain, ever before they germinate, perfectly formed leaves, the miniature shapes of the plants they will become. Nature thus giving us a specimen of the preformation of its production. The lotus signifies the emanation of the objective from the subjective, divine ideation passing from the abstract into the concrete or visible form. Through analogy and correspondence, we can use the symbol of the lotus and HPB's other illustrations to see that everything from the cosmos to man and everything around us is rooted in the divine spark from the one all, gradually passing through the spiritual world, materializing from primordial matter and differentiating into numerous forms. Man, the most developed form on earth, was rooted into the Matyaka matter for experience in and uplifting the various kingdoms of nature. Man was nourished and pushed forward by the natural impulse of nature until the lighting of mind occurred. And man was ready to use his own self-induced and self-devised methods to develop his inner psychic feeling nature as he was nourished by the yet mystic illusions of life in the material world, and finally make his way to the surface of the pond, connect with the sun, and unfold from within outward his higher spiritual nature, the beautiful flower that he is. Connected with the lotus symbol, you have the theosophical path laid out by HPB to guide our development through this elusive world and beyond. As spiritual entities, we maximize our internal potential to learn and grow through the astral plane, as pointed out in the Light of Asia and signposts left by HPB to guide us through the Makya and to point out the way for others. We need not get diverted by the false and fanciful stops and starts we encounter in the world that seems to be filled with self-styled spiritual leaders, modern life coaches, and the like. We already have the signposts and the principles she laid out in the recommended publications to guide us as we work to bring forth the knowledge, the discrimination, the wisdom needed to act timely with courage and clear vision. Within the jewel of the lotus, in each of us, lies the potential to defer the temporary bliss of materialism and beyond, so that we may help ourselves and others achieve a soul life free of attachments, appetites, possessions, anxieties, fear, and anger. Every one of us can do something within our own spheres of influence to help usher us from this Iron Age to the Golden Age we keep hearing about. Remember that picking up a banana peel from the street with the right motive is just as important from the spiritual level as the accomplishments of the greatest of our world leaders. Theosophy encourages us to be all that we can be. Where are we in truly understanding that we are eternal souls, currently transported in transient bodies and personalities, and that we are establishing our future makeup and that of our world around us, as we work to control our thoughts and steadfastly keep our every moment focused on advancing the three objects? And if you value this jewel of theosophy that points the way to the eradication of ignorance and superstition, uprooting of selfishness and separateness, and laying of a sound basis for universal brotherhood as we complete our journey through matter on our way back to the source of all life, this birthright of humankind, what can you commit yourself to in order to help diffuse, spread, broadcast these teachings in their purity, and otherwise keep the chain unbroken, so that HPB's life of dedication to humanity will live on, and her request will be realized, that we not allow her incarnation to be in vain. Thank you and best wishes as we all endeavor to make Theosophy a living power in our lives, and appreciate the sacrifices of HPB in transmitting to us this priceless gift.